Yeah? Okay. We acknowledge our hosts, the United Arab Emirates. We acknowledge those of you who've travelled a very long way. In fact, the Pacific's pretty much on the other side of the world to the United Arab Emirates. If you drill a hole in Dubai, right through the centre of the earth, you pop out at Pitcairn Island, basically. So many of you have travelled a very long way. Thank you for that. So, my name's Ian McGill. I'll introduce myself a little more formally in a moment. And the plan for the next 50 minutes or so is the Government of Australia, Peter Ollison, was going to make some opening remarks. She's stuck in a queue right now, as are many people. So we'll leave a bit of time and opportunity if she's able to make it towards the end of the session. We're going to get some regional context, and we have Exley from Pacific Community. We also have Anthony, who's the Director of Energy in Vanuatu. We're going to hear from IRENA, which has been International Renewable Energy Agency, which has been doing really leading work on hydrogen globally and also in the Pacific. We're then going to hear from Dayan, who'll be speaking about some of the early work done for a project. We'll talk a little bit more about the project as well, a project which involves University of New South Wales, Pacific Community, IRENA, the Australian Government Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, and also the University of the South Pacific. And Dayan's going to be launching the first of a series of reports for discussion and engagement, for consultation. And then we're going to have a panel discussion, so please think of questions, including curly questions that you might wish to ask of our panel. So that's the agenda for the next 50 minutes or so. My name's Ian McGill. I'm a Professor of Energy Systems, and with Dayan, we jointly lead a theme on techno-economic assessment for the Australian Research Council's Training Centre for the Global Hydrogen Economy. We can talk a little bit more about that later. And the region has been thinking about hydrogen pathways for some time, but it's still fairly early. This is something we also see globally, of course. IRENA's done some of the leading work mapping out hydrogen in a global sense. If you want to get to net zero, you need some green hydrogen. How much is a discussion. IRENA suggests maybe around 15% of final energy demand, more or less. But that doesn't tell us what the Pacific should be doing with hydrogen. And so this project really came out of the 5th PREDM, the Pacific Regional Energy and Transport Ministers meeting, held in Port Vila back in May. I should say that meeting was only a couple of months after Vanuatu experienced the unprecedented event of 2 Category 5 cyclones, I think, within a couple of days each other. So the region's already experiencing the challenges of climate change, the adverse impacts. The energy ministers made the call for more engagement with the region in the role that green hydrogen might be able to play. Now, Peter was going to provide some opening remarks on the Australian context. We're very hopeful she might be able to arrive towards the end, so we'll leave some minutes for her if she does manage to get here. They were kicked off the metro twice, I think, on their way here, and then I think they're currently stuck in a queue. So all I would say on the Australian government's behalf is you may well be aware that Australia is has very ambitious plans for renewable hydrogen, not only for Australia, but also for assisting other regions in the world through renewable hydrogen derivative exports. Hopefully Peter can talk more to that. We are also very blessed to have IRENA here. I should say that Goebbels did get caught up, but Amjad has very, very kindly agreed to make some opening remarks giving IRENA's perspective, which of course is global on hydrogen, but they've also did some of the early work with Palau, and we have some Palau colleagues here on transition road mapping that also included hydrogen. So could you please join me in welcoming Amjad? Would you like to stand or just sit down, whichever you prefer?
Thank you very much. Apologies from my boss. He couldn't be. He's caught up, as you may know, that the logistics here is still kind of trying to sort it out. But again, I'm very pleased to be here just to provide the perspectives of IRENA. Good morning, colleagues, friends. Thank you for joining us as we examine the prospect of green hydrogen for the Pacific region through the collaborative efforts of IRENA, the Pacific Community, the Australia Department of Climate Change, Energy and the Environment and Water, of course the University of New South Wales, University of South Pacific. The work responds directly to a request made by Pacific ministers at the 5th Pacific Regional Energy and Transport Ministers meeting in May this year, where IRENA was represented in Vanuatu, which they called on IRENA and other partners to further examine the potential role of green hydrogen and its derivatives for decarbonization of Blue Pacific with a view of developing a time-bound Pacific regional green hydrogen strategy. Obviously, the Pacific region is ready to accelerate the energy transition towards renewables, which is away from, as you may know, the fossil fuel, and the green hydrogen powered by renewables presents an enormous opportunity for economic growth, enhanced energy resilience, security, sustainability in small islands, as highlighted in the opening remarks. Of course, currently, as a region, 67% of energy needs in the Pacific seats are met by the very obvious fossil fuel-based, while 8% of needs are provided by renewable sources. This imbalance calls for urgent action in exploring innovations and emerging solutions such as green hydrogen. In this regard, through the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative, IRENA continues to support SIDS by undertaking tailored analysis and technical assistance as we path to move from assessments to implementation, such as upcoming 2024 Pacific Investment Forum, which IRENA is going to host in the Pacific. IRENA is also building its role in supporting policymakers to create an enabling environment for green hydrogen as a pillar of the energy transition, to foster dialogue, cooperation, and coordinated action to accelerate development of green hydrogen and its derivatives. A collaborative framework was established which leverages the knowledge and expertise of IRENA membership and the agency's work on green hydrogen. To date, IRENA body of work on green hydrogen has focused on the innovation, infrastructure, investments, and certification aspects needed to enable global hydrogen trade, and more broadly, the enabling measures needed to achieve a large-scale development. The potential of green hydrogen in seeds has been explored by IRENA through renewable energy roadmaps for Antigua and Barbuda and the Republic of Palau. Both roadmaps express the importance of setting renewable energy development and energy efficiency measures on top of their energy transition agenda, and a successful system transformation which can be complemented by green hydrogen. A promising area of the practical application of green hydrogen lies in replacing fossil fuels for transportation areas, sea, air, and land, in particular in the Pacific region, where maritime transport plays a critical role in the socio-economic landscapes. The adoption of green hydrogen has the potential to revolutionize and optimize the existing transport options. For SIDS and other countries, priority settings for green hydrogen applications is critical because of production, transport, and conversion requires energy investment. Our challenges for green hydrogen to be economically competitive in the SIDS in the high cost of renewable energy supply and market scalability. Notwithstanding, there are opportunities for renewable energy production costs to decline and for cost reduction through a regional approach. There are also some specific hydrogen productions which SIDS must consider, including the need for an abundance of spare renewable energy, electricity, water, skilled workers, and costly infrastructure, which must be further examined. For green hydrogen to become a reality in the SIDS, concerted efforts are obviously required by all actors. This includes building capacity, creating a supportive policy framework and regulatory framework that incentivizes the transition to hydrogen, and international cooperation and collaboration and partnerships will therefore be a critical enabler for us successful to deliver these challenges. On this point, I wish to extend our gratitude to the Pacific community, the Australian Department of Environment, Climate Change, Energy and Water, the University of South Pacific, for their steadfast commitment and contribution to this important strategy, which will obviously serve a valuable tool for guiding the development of a regional hydrogen ecosystem. Again, IRENA stands ready to continue to work with all actors to deliver tailor-made support for Pacific SIDS energy transition and climate action. I look forward to hearing your perspectives during this consultation, and I look forward to contributing this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Anjad, particularly for stepping in at such short notice. It's very, very appreciated. Time for some regional perspectives, and Exley from the Pacific community was invited to provide a few remarks. So please join me in welcoming Exley.
Thank you very much, Professor Yan, and very good morning to all of you. Warm greetings from the Pacific. I actually work in SPC's division for geoscience, energy and maritime. That's one of 9 divisions within the Pacific community. And today I've been asked to provide some regional perspectives on this very important topic that we are having a discussion on, which relates to green energy. I thought it's useful before I provide some information on the role of SPC and some suggestions for what's next after Dubai. I think it's useful to provide a bit of context from a regional lens in regards to the situation we have in our region. Like other countries across the world, the Pacific is currently facing an energy crisis issue. As you all know, about 80% of our energy requirements in the Pacific is driven by fossil fuel. Almost 100% of requirement in the transport sector is also driven by fossil fuels. In terms of access to electricity, at the moment we have only about 64% of access to electricity across our region. So it presents us with a situation that is challenging, but it also provides us with opportunities to explore new technologies that's currently coming online within other regions. I understand that from the intervention made earlier by Amjad, IRENA is working with other countries, other SEEDS members in the Caribbean and in the Indian Ocean to explore these issues. The current crisis, the energy crisis that we are facing in the region is further exacerbated by climate change, which is our single greatest threat in the region, as continuously reaffirmed by our Pacific Island Forum leaders. Just a few weeks ago, our Pacific Island Forum leaders had their 52nd meeting in Cook Islands, and in that meeting that they had in Cook Islands, our leaders made a commitment to just an equitable transition towards a fossil fuel-free Pacific, yet acknowledging that the pathway is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It requires contextualization to the national context of our countries in the region. And I'm pleased to see that in this panel today, we also have the Director of Energy from Vanuatu, who will be sharing the national perspective from Vanuatu. Pacific leaders have also committed to transition away from coal, oil, and gas in our energy systems, in line with the IPCC's latest science to limit global warming. And the threshold that Pacific SEEDS have always advocated for is ensuring that we keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. And last year, our leaders in the Pacific declared a climate emergency. So that's our collective challenge that all of us in the Pacific are working towards ensuring that we facilitate and lead and secure a resilient and sustainable pathway for our region, for our communities, and also for our children and our future generations. In saying that, it is important to underline that access to renewable and relevant energy approaches is very, very important and needs to be accelerated. And in this context, the importance of having this discussion today on the potential role of green energy as an innovative technology, and how it is going to be useful to the context and the challenge that we are facing in our region in the Pacific. Let me now move on and provide some perspectives on where we see a role for the Pacific community. Within the region, the Pacific Community, or SPC, is the lead technical agency that supports our Pacific Island countries and territories in the energy sector. And we also have the oversight in coordinating our regional energy framework, which is called the Framework for Energy Security and Resilience in the Pacific, FESRIP 2021 to 2030, which by coincidence also aligns with the time frame for the Paris Agreement and the SDGs and other international policy frameworks. Within our region, our leaders have also recently endorsed the implementation plan for a long-term vision called the 2050 Strategy for our Blue Pacific continent. And in that, the issue of renewable energy and energy and transition towards cleaner energy and green energy is also a key priority of that. So we do coordinate the implementation of the FESRIP within the region, in addition to the roles of other agencies, for instance, the Pacific Power Association, which is also one of the 9 crop agencies in the Pacific. I just also wanted to build on the early intervention that Amjad made, which provided the political mandate for this work to be undertaken. And in this instance, acknowledging the support provided by DCCEEW, the Australian government, and also the University of New South Wales in developing the FACE report, which will be presented later on. And it emanates from the recent 5th Pacific Regional Energy and Transport Ministers meeting, which took place in Vanuatu in May, as highlighted by Amjad earlier. And SPC convenes that meeting for our energy ministers in the Pacific. And it is that meeting that, for the first time, provided the political mandate to undertake this work. And in doing that, they reaffirmed their commitment to the Paris Agreement, and coming out with the FATE declaration, they also recognize the potential of green energy and its derivatives in decarbonizing the region. The Pacific Energy Ministers also called for partners to examine the potential role of green hydrogen, as well as hopefully with that would lead to the development of a regional strategy on green energy. On the next steps, before I finish my intervention for today, I think the work that has been undertaken so far with the support of University of New South Wales and the other partners that have been acknowledged earlier today, it is really critical that we ensure that the Pacific Island countries' needs and context be front and center of this work as we work towards the development of a regional strategy for green energy. The fact is, this is an issue that there is still a lot of unknowns for our region. There is still a lot of unanswered questions, and we hope that through the mapping exercise and the study that the University of New South Wales is supporting all of us with will provide some additional insights and information on the potential for this new technology, but also allow us to learn from other regions and other countries. And this is where the role of IRENA is really important, to learn from what the Caribbean is doing, to learn from what our seats in Africa are doing, so that we can take it forward as potential learning for our own region in the Pacific. In this instance, SPC stands committed to continue to support with the partners that are advancing this work. And we hope that together, as we continue to consult with our governments in the region and our people in the region, we will be able to move towards the development of a regional strategy focused on green energy to assist in supplementing the different measures and steps undertaken by country parties as we move towards a low carbon development pathway in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Exley. And one of the opportunities and challenges for the region, of course, is the diversity of the jurisdictions, the Pacific Islands and countries and territories that sit within that. So when you're thinking about a regional hydrogen strategy, in the end, of course, we have to be thinking about the way the jurisdictions engage and the differences, as well as shared challenges and opportunities they face. And we're delighted that Anthony Gray, who's the Director of the Department of Energy at Vanuatu, very kindly offered to just participate in our panel as well. And I was wondering, Anthony, if you'd be happy to just make a few brief remarks. We'll come back to jurisdictional perspectives in the discussion, but please join me in welcoming Anthony.
Thank you, Dr. Yen. Good morning, everyone. Again, firstly, thank you, the Government of Australia, for the invite to be here this morning. I'm happy to join the other panelists. I think from a jurisdiction perspective, we've heard my colleague from SPC has highlighted a lot in terms of a regional context, which includes, which covers Vanuatu. But I think for us specifically, these are the necessary tools that we would need, given that even we have clear policies, frameworks in place, but those are just policies. But the implementation of these policies is the most critical part. So often the PCITS countries being the most vulnerable countries, some of the most vulnerable countries in the world, at times we are challenged when it comes to implementing our policies. So having clear roadmaps and the technology, outlining the technologies to which will assist us in driving the implementation of our policies is what is needed backed with other means of implementation. But I think from a jurisdiction perspective, I think it's timely that we welcome new innovative technologies as hydrogen as a substitute for fossil fuel. And I think for Vanuatu, as some of you may know, we are one of the countries that we have a very ambitious NDC when it comes to renewable energy, which we anticipate a transition closer to 100% renewable energy by 2030. So having to explore different innovative technologies to assist us in this transition pathway is something that country like Vanuatu, for us specifically, we embrace and welcome these new technologies if it's an avenue for us to capitalize on, either to substitute fossil fuel, but also given our heavy reliance on fossil fuel, this could be a means to promote energy security for us, given that we are at the end of the supply chain, and we've seen during COVID, the logistical issues is a challenge, and therefore having an alternative fuel such as green hydrogen is something that we could explore and as part of our strategy forward to implement the just transition for Vanuatu. But I think for Vanuatu, in collaboration with the Government of Australia and the University of New South Wales, we are proud that Vanuatu has been chosen as a country to pilot or to develop a first just transition pathway, to which I believe it will align, will also incorporate hydrogen as a means of green fuel for Vanuatu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I should just say that the work with Vanuatu on energy transitions, there's an event in the Moana Pavilion next Saturday. And Anthony will be speaking more then, as will others. That work is being led by Janendra just over there, if you want to have a chat to him about that as well. So I'll just get that plug in. Now, I should say our Australian colleagues have made it through all the queues and arrived, but I think, Peter, you'd be happy to make some closing remarks? Yeah, so we'll do that. So I might invite the panel just to sit in the front row, because there's a bit of death by PowerPoint coming up. Dayan and I are academics, so nothing stays undocumented, of course, as you can imagine. So we're going to move very quickly through parts of it. But of course, the slides are available so you can go back and see more. And Dayan will also be formally launching the first report for consultation. So Dayan is leading the DQ-funded project. I'll come to that a bit. I have the pleasure and honour of working with him on that project. And Scientia Senior Lecturer, ARC DECRA Fellow in the School of Mineral and Resources Engineering at the University of New South Wales. So just give me a moment and then we'll get to Dayan. Hang on. So Exley flagged this, so did Amjad. We had the IFADE outcome statement with the call for a regional strategy and roadmap around renewable hydrogen. And we're extremely fortunate that the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water funded a consortia led by UNSW, but in close collaboration with IRENA, Pacific Community, University of the South Pacific. I'm sure I've forgotten someone there, but that'll do for a start, to basically undertake this work. There's our project partners there, both Diane and I are part of UNSW's ARC Training Centre for the Future Hydrogen Economy, and our work area is particularly around techno-economic assessments, so feasibility pathways, business models, road mapping. So that's the basis on which we bring to this. As discussed earlier, hydrogen has a really key role. It's by not the major role, and there's an important aspect to this. Hydrogen is extraordinarily flexible. You can do just about anything with it. It's a wonder molecule, but it's up against a wonder electron, which is renewable electricity generation. So all the global mappings around the world for energy transition, we're seeing it in the call for renewables and energy efficiency here at this COP being led by IRENA and others, is renewables and electrification is really the key strategy. But we have a number of sectors, actually Amjad have discussed them. Diane will go into some more detail, where electrification directly looks pretty challenging, and we're looking for storable fuels. So this is a key challenge for the region in their ambitious decarbonisation plans, and a key opportunity for renewable hydrogen and derivatives. We'll come to the derivatives bit in a minute. Particular focus is going to be on domestic navigation, so shipping, as well as obviously international shipping. Challenging sector. You've got to carry a lot of fuel, particularly when you're travelling to the Pacific. Also aviation. And then there's some other possible roles it may play as well. This is something that the region and the jurisdictions within the region really need to come to a landing on. The Pacific Island countries and territories have been taking a leadership role. I think we're about to lose the soundtrack. I think that's probably a good thing. But, they've been playing a real leadership role. Part of leadership, of course, is being the change you want to see more broadly in the world. So very ambitious goals around decarbonisation. Of course, their strategy and their motivations go well beyond that. As Anthony flagged, they sit on the end of long, vulnerable supply chains. They spend an enormous amount of their GDP on fossil fuel imports. So they're looking for solutions and pathways that help manage this, that also support economic development, jobs, which if you haven't seen it, IRENA's second stage Energy Transitions Outlook has a great section on jobs with renewable energy transition. We've had a number of speakers flag the current dependence of the region on imported fossil fuels. PNG is a bit of an outlier in terms of that, given their very significant oil and gas production. But otherwise, the region is spending a lot, bringing in a lot of fuels. For electricity generation, that's changing, but then also particularly transport, including maritime and aviation. The emissions of the region really in a global sense aren't that significant, but they are determined to provide leadership and show pathways forward. Many of the Pacific Islands and countries and territories have extremely ambitious renewables targets in electricity and energy more generally. The report that Diane's going to be launching will flag some of that. We've done an analysis across many, not all, of the Pacific Island countries and territories, which goes through also the NDC, climate challenge ambitions. I think we'll get to that in a moment. Many compelling reasons for renewables. Renewables are much more fairly distributed around the world than fossil fuels are. And however, there still are going to be regional questions about the ability to make renewable fuels locally versus potentially also continuing to import some level of clean fuels from elsewhere. Key application areas really hinge on getting beyond green hydrogen, renewable hydrogen gas into derivative forms, which are directly useful for a whole range of applications and are also much better suited to storage, a key thing for putting it on ships, for putting it into planes, and so on. So a particular focus of this work is thinking around methanol, green ammonia, green methanol, renewable diesels, and SAF there is sustainable aviation fuels. So the early work, we're just trying to map out potential roles of renewable hydrogen, but now the work of engaging with regions and partners to start really getting a better sense of what the region sees as the key needs is now beginning. So at this point, please join me in welcoming Diane, who's been leading this work out of University of New South Wales.
Thank you, Ian. I think you summed up quite well. I think our strategy development, this has actually been, our role has been just a supporting role. We've been hearing from the region, we've been having a lot of workshops within the region, and today what we are presenting is region-led information. All we're doing is just a facilitating role. So the first thing with respect to strategy development, data and economic modeling. Now, your economic model is as good as the data that you feed in. So what we're trying to do within this strategy development, within this roadmap, is making sure that we don't reinvent the wheel. So we've been looking into publicly available data, and we acknowledge the significant support we have gotten from the region, SPC. We have also got a lot of support from USP and the different governments, and also to mention IRENA and their database as well, in order to look into a bit of a country-specific assessment. So we've been looking into a lot of the different regions, looking into their CO2 footprint, looking into renewable potential, wind potential, biomass feasibility, land approval, policy, mapping that whole value chain. And these are all publicly available. And this would all reside in USP and SPC's portal, because we actually want the region to actually, update and actually drive this conversation. So what have we found? Well, hydrogen and derivatives, there is a bit of a niche market, as Ian flagged, right? It's not for everything. It's a wonder molecule. We talk about for everything, but maybe for the region, we got to think from a regional lens. And what we're hearing from the region, that perhaps it will have a bit of a complementary role in land transport, maybe for heavy-duty mobility, but maybe not for light mobility. This has been clearly flagged by the region. Maritime. Now that's important, right? That's lifeline of the economy. And when we think of maritime, it isn't always the long-term maritime distances, it would also be the island hopping. Now, the question is, how do we make that economical? What are the pathways? Would it be renewable diesel? Would it be ammonia? Would it be methanol? There are some concerns with some of the vector, concerns with some of the policies, concerns with some of the standards. And this is what we are trying to unearth within this with this strategy. Aviation, I think this is one opportunity where sustainable aviation fuel, it's quite difficult to replace with other alternatives in the short run. While electric planes and hydrogen fuel cell planes are coming into the market, SAF is one of the potential, or is the only short-term solution. And the beauty of SAF, though, and this is where there is an opportunity for the region to actually take their energy independence and have that fuel produced in-house within those territories, because the region has a lot of biomass. And utilizing that biomass efficiently, making sure that per ton of biomass you get the maximum SAF output, that's something that we are trying to do, trying to map those technology, map the costing, and working with our respective government and organizations in the region to understand. Interestingly, we also found some of quite different unique applications for hydrogen derivatives. We spoke with a couple of the hotels, and they're now looking at, rather than long-term duration with battery, they're looking at hydrogen energy storage system. And the reason behind it is the region, with its salinity, humidity, some of the batteries' life cycle isn't that long. And that's where potentially hydrogen may play a role, and this is being investigated in a couple of projects. I must flag, hydrogen is not new to the region. There are a lot of projects already expand, and this is increasing very quickly up in the region. Now, to what extent hydrogen plays a role within the region's overall energy ecosystem, this only time will tell. all we are doing right now is just mapping the potential, but this is just potential, right? Hydrogen would effectively, we don't know what pathways would really come ahead. Like for domestic electricity generation, if there is not a lot of land available within different islands, maybe you ship some of the derivative. But if you have land availability, then perhaps you apply a different approach. You go for direct electrification. So it depends on island, jurisdiction, context, ability of local infrastructure to support local personnel to support those projects. Renewable diesel would be same as typical diesel, and you might not have to retrofit your diesel generator. So these are the things that we need to consider when we're talking about energy transition in the region. So I'm going to quickly skip over a couple of these slides, but we've been looking a little bit into the available data, as I flagged, looking into the CO2 availability, the biomass resourcing, and it's quite important to also note the competing use for this biomass because they would potentially be used for some other application, and it's important to acknowledge that. Do we have the social license to use that biomass for synthetic fuel production? And also, even if the price premium for that is high or there is an economic scenario, should we really do that? These are the conversations that we have been having with the region. It's not always about the economics, it's about that overall picture. Land and water availability. To make hydrogen, you need water. Water is a very scarce resource in the region. Now, looking into pathways of generating water, whether from desal or whether from wastewater, and this is something that we have been mapping out for the different territories and for the different countries. So this is just a preliminary finding dependent on a potential hydrogen economy. You have the ASEAN flag, net importers versus net exporters. Maybe potentially you might have some power to X hub where maybe some of the bigger islands might generate a lot of hydrogen and derivatives and you ship it off. So we're looking into those sort of possible supply chain options within the region. Most important aspect of this strategy development has been that open-ended conversation with the region. So to facilitate that, we have launched a website which we plan to migrate to SPC's portal. We're working on that process. So this will be a region-led support. The University of New South Wales and the training center, we would be facilitating, we would be supporting with back-end knowledge gap, questions, and we'll be supporting, but this would be all within the SPC's portfolio for the region to understand the different technologies, the findings. So I'm very pleased and to actually release the first report that we did, the assessing the hydrogen potential. We showed some of the findings today, talking about the opportunity. Draft for consultation today at this event, and please have a look through, go to the website, or even if you type Pacific Hydrogen Strategy, it comes in. Provide your feedback. If you want to contribute, if you have companies who are interested in the region, if you have technology vendors, if you have financiers, please let us know. We can connect with the different government and with the different agencies within the region as well. Now, this feasibility study or this strategy development, it's a journey. It's not a report that we just want to hand over and this is the cost of hydrogen. For us, it's about building that capacity in the region. So what we have been doing, underlying all this is an open source tool for the region so that anybody up in the region can pop their hydrogen cost, pop their capital cost, and come up with the value chain estimates. So next step for us would be a bit of a technology assessment because technology, large-scale technology, which may be applicable in Australia, may not be applicable in the region. So we're looking a little bit in that aspect, talking to the technology vendors to see what are the exactly, the technology, hydrogen electrolyzers or derivative production that we can put up in the region. The scale, can we make it small enough? Can we make it big enough? So we're looking into all those sort of TR technology readiness level, the costing, to inform the region that these are the options. As we mentioned, biomass availability, we have to maximize that biomass for synthetic fuel. So what technology gives you that? We want the region to know about all the options. And building on all, we'll be mapping that value chain and subsequently building that strategy with all the stakeholders that we discussed today. The other key component of this strategy development has been a lot of the conversations, sharing the lessons from IRENA, the SEEDS initiative in the region. We've had a couple of workshops already. Our experience in developing hydrogen strategy and projects in Australia, we have worked with New South Wales government on a couple of projects. We're looking into sharing all that knowledge so that we don't really the region doesn't have to really invent all the policies and standards. We can actually share what's available so that the region can take forward and then proceed ahead much faster. So I think with that, I'll pass it back to Ian, and thank you so much for listening.
You probably won't be surprised to hear we're running a little later on schedule than we had hoped. But before we come to Peter's closing remarks with an Australian government perspective, would welcome any questions from the floor to any or all of our panellists about what you've heard today. Your question could be a comment, perhaps, around next steps, if that's something you'd also like to. Fantastic. Tim, just could you please say who you are, Tim, and where you're from?
Thank you. So I'm Tim Stock, Director for Hydrogen and Clean Energy at the New South Wales Government. My question is about the study and the understanding whether the Pacific nations as a whole, and the list that were, there were some that were net importers and some that were exporters or production centres. On a whole, is it likely that the Pacific will be able to be self or have the capacity to be neutral, i.e. the net exporting countries within the Pacific will be able to service the other Pacific nations, or are you looking to have exports from other nations such as Australia?
That's the trillion-dollar question, isn't it? But let me pass to Dayan for that one.
So I think what we have been noticing, talking to the region, is the region's obviously open to all the pathways, and it has to be the most economical pathway for energy transition. However, having said that, the focus, first of all, would always be domestic production, try to see if we can, if we can supply or support the hard-to-abate sectors from some of the larger countries, which has the potential to host this type of P2X hub. But I'll let maybe Exley and Anthony to elaborate.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think that's the reason why I mentioned the importance of consultation as the next step beyond this report and the other series of reports that are expected. Because in doing that, it helps our countries to be aware of what's available and the scale that is available within each of our countries. But in the immediate term, I note that the focus is on domestic use, as the doctor has highlighted, and hopefully in the future, because as I mentioned, this is an issue that is an emerging issue of interest, but we need to understand it a bit more. So I think it might be too premature to start thinking ahead or whether we should be exporting and so forth. I think at this stage is understanding the feasibility of this innovative technology within the region. And then hopefully by then it would inform additional steps that the region could take going forward. It's going to be a political issue, as I can foresee, where we would need to take it and to be able to convince our leaders to a stage that they would be able to endorse a regional strategy that could be used in the region. But I think with the political mandate that we already have, with the commitment that the leaders have made to move towards low carbon development and just transition within our region, and that it's already a priority in the 2050 strategy, I think if we take it in the right pathway, I foresee that there won't be any issues in regards to getting it across the line, and there will be always lessons learned as we start to implement that work in the Pacific.
Anthony, would you like to add some comments on that?
Yeah, thank you. I think actually has pretty much covered it, but I think from a national context, it will depend like on the national circumstances. I think put it this way, like having the mandate to transition into renewable is, I think, for us, that's the main objective, to consider hydrogen as an alternate, but also should it permit us also to look at potential of exporting it. Again, like we've heard from Diane, depending on the available, the water resources we have and the quantity that can allow Vanuatu to re-export that. I think looking at the map, Vanuatu is placed in a strategic hub where we could support Australia maybe to deliver hydrogen if it comes, it becomes mature, to supply into the region. But again, it comes back to the point actually made around the political leadership in how we perceive the role of hydrogen in the region. Thank you.
Amjad, I wonder if you might want to comment on it. IRENA has done some great reports on international hydrogen trade. I think there was a large one a couple of years ago. Is there anything you'd like to also add on this question of importers versus exporters versus self-supply?
I think I did indicate in my intervention, I think the fact that matters in the Pacific is about the scalability, because that's the common challenge that we face in the Pacific or any small islands. If you try to make it, because that's why I think my DG has always been advocate for the narrative of the international cooperation, the need to change the infrastructure. And of course, the demand on fossil fuel, if you don't kind of, reduce the demand on fossil fuel, there's no way that you can track towards renewable. I think that's a key, because I think I would really like to, whatever you can within your lobbying, I think that's a key thing that everyone has to focus on, deviating from fossil fuel. Because if there is a demand, obviously people will go towards fossil fuel. I think you need to reduce the demand, eliminate the demand. Don't finger point to people who are extracting fossil fuel. Rather reduce it, because then it's a win-win for all. And again, as I said, I think the fact is that, a country with, we're talking about handful of people. Not handful, thousands of people in any country. The scale is not there. So you obviously need to focus on regional aspects. I think my colleagues here in the Pacific, they have done a great work, especially SPC and other organizations in the region. And that's why we are collaborating as IRENA, as international partner responsible for the adoption and use of renewable energy across the globe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amjad. I'm afraid time's kind of caught up with us, so it might be best to just thank our panel. I think they'll be able to stay around, so just grab them over a coffee. But please join me in thanking the panel. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. And Peter, she's just fresh off the plane, maybe not so fresh, but anyway, she's made it into the venue. And could you please join me in welcoming Peter Olsen from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water to make some closing remarks.
Thank you, and hello everyone.